Hello, hello, family. How are we doing? Welcome to Let's Talk with Sister E. This is Sister E. My apologies first, everyone, for my tardiness. We had a couple of technical issues we had to get resolved, but we're here. We're here. So thank you so much for your patience and your time waiting on us. Now, we plan to have a wonderful conversation. I'll bring my guest in just a second. I kind of want to walk everybody through it. So I will say this much. Please make sure while we're in here that we follow the guidelines as far as YouTube policy. Make sure that we're respectful. If you have questions, keep the questions after the fact. So we're going to have a great writer by the name of Dr. Tudor Parfitt on, and we're going to also have our wonderful brother from Zimbabwe on, Kohen Hamandishe. So hopefully this will be a great conversation. Everybody can enjoy it and understand what some of the topics we're going to bring about. So let me bring in my guests. So first I have Pastor Kelly. He's going to be with us. Greet the family, Pastor.
I want to say peace and blessings to everyone, and thank everyone for tuning in. We're going to have a great discussion here, and it's an honor to be before you guys again. I know it's been a while since I've done any type of lives, but appreciate you, Sister E, for putting this live together, and with the guests that you have on the panel. So really appreciate it. So peace and blessings, everyone.
All right, then we have our brother. I hope I'm saying your first name right, Tyvon.
Tyvon. No worries.
Tyvon, I'm used to calling you Moor, so
yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I had to switch it up. We got the doctor on the panel. You know what I'm saying?
So we got Tyvon. Say something to the people.
Yeah, shalom to the family. I'm looking very much forward to this conversation. There should be a lot of interesting topics and a lot of interesting information coming out.
All
Appreciate
right.
y'all being here.
And we have our wonderful brother, Kohen Hamandishe. How are you? We can't hear you. Hold on, let me unmute you. All right.
I'm fine, Sister Matthew. How are you?
All right. I'm great. And we have Dr. Tudor Parfitt. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Very pleased to be here. Thank you, Sister E.
Thank you. So we can get started. I kind of wanted to bring Dr. Tudor Parfitt on because of the amazing books that he wrote in reference to the Jews in Africa. And one of the amazing things that I saw was back in my college days, we had to do a research paper on tribes in Africa. And one of my professors brought up, this was at the time I was attending University of Memphis, brought up a Nova documentary on PBS as it pertains to Dr. Tudor Parfitt and his journey within Zimbabwe and how he came about, came in contact with the Lemba community. And after that, I always said I wanted to kind of meet Dr. Parfitt, but at that time, I guess it was not time for me to do what I'm doing now. But now that I am in this world and I'm doing a little bit more research, I kind of wanted to bring him on and get his viewpoint and get an idea of what his journey was about when he first came across the Lemba community. So we can go ahead and get started. So Dr. Parfitt, first, before we even get started with the questions, can you give us a little background history on yourself? I know everybody knows you, but I still wanted them to kind of get the ones that don't know you, they can get introduced to you.
Well, I'm obviously British. You can tell that straight away from my accent. And I got interested in the Jewish people when I was 19 years old. I went to Israel as a volunteer. And for a year, I worked with people, some of whom had been in concentration camps, others of whom had different kinds of handicap in an institution just outside Jerusalem. And I started to learn a bit of Hebrew. I had an amazing year. I fell in love with the place, no question about that. And then I went on to university in Oxford in England. And I was supposed to be studying history, but I soon changed to Hebrew and Arabic and Jewish history and Muslim history and these sorts of things. And that really was the beginning of my interest in what I'm doing now. And yeah.
That's amazing. That's so funny. When I had to take the class, it was a history class because I was a computer science IT major, so it was an elective. But it was amazing to see that documentary that explained the journey, because here in the States we never really had any introduction to the Lemba community. And like I said, you had to take that one class, and it had always been in the back of my brain about the Lemba. And as you get older and life begins to unfold, you tend to forget some things that you've learned, and it takes something that makes it kind of jog your memory, say, oh, I remember this. And I had that moment because and this was in fact after I found out I was Lemba, and I was watching the documentary. I said, I remember this documentary in school, and having to do different research in reference to the Ethiopian Jews and the Lemba and other communities like the Igbo. So it was very interesting. So one of my questions I have is, how did you come across the Lemba community?
In 1984, I was asked by the minority rights group to go to the Sudan because rumors had reached London that Ethiopian Jews who were fleeing the Great Famine of 1984, 1985,
yeah, I remember that.
they were being poisoned in the refugee camps along the border by Christian refugees. That was what we heard. And so I was sent to write a report on the position of the Ethiopian Jews. So that was my first introduction to to Black Jews. And I went on to write my report. I also wrote a book which was called Operation Moses a few months later. And then I was invited to go to Johannesburg to give a lecture about the Ethiopian Jews and particularly what I'd seen myself a few months before. And so I gave this lecture, and there were a lot of white Jews there, and at the back of the hall there were some black men wearing Jewish skull caps, kippot or yarmulkes. And I went to talk to them afterwards, and they told me that they were the same as the Ethiopian Jews, and they told me this whole story. And well, I was a scholar. I'd never heard of Black Jews in Africa except for Ethiopia. And so I looked pretty skeptical, and they could tell that I was skeptical. And they said, why didn't you come with us and come to our village, and you'll see that we really are Jews. So we drove up north, somewhere close to the border with Zimbabwe. And over the next few days, it became clear to me that there was something very strange here. There was something which seemed to be very Jewish and certainly Semitic. And I was intrigued by by what I'd seen. So I went back to London, went to see my publisher, and I told him the story. And he was very excited, and he said, you've got to write a book. And I got permission from my university, which was then the University of London, to go to Africa. And so I went on a long journey. And the idea of the journey was to see if I could cast any light on the tradition of the Lemba, that they had come from the north, from a place called Sena.
Sena, yes.
Sena. So it was a very interesting legend. So according to the Lemba, and I went and stayed in their villages in Zimbabwe and South Africa, and the old men would sit around a fire at night and they would tell their stories. And so the main kind of story of origin was, we came from Sena, we crossed Pusela, we came to Africa, and we rebuilt Sena. And then some of our members ate mice, which was a forbidden food. And as a result, we got scattered among the nations. That was the story that I heard time and time and time again. And so the spiritual head of the Lemba at that time was a certain Professor Mativa, who became a very good friend of mine. And it was Professor Mativa that said, you've got to find Senna. This is what we need to know. We need to know where is Senna. So my plan was to go through Africa, following the oral traditions that the old men told me. And I should just say that among the Lemba, this was a strictly male thing. Women didn't know, weren't allowed to know anything about the history of the tribe. And so the idea was to follow the stories, and the stories would be, yes, well, I heard from my grandfather and he heard from his grandfather that we came to this village by way of the White Mountain. And prior to that, we'd crossed a particular stream where there is a mountain which looks like a monkey, and so on, things like this. And so a lot of it I was walking, so I would walk from village to village to village. And eventually, you know, I didn't do it all on foot, of course, because I crossed a great chunk of Africa, but a lot of it was. And eventually I got to the sea. Along the route, I made a lot of very interesting discoveries in terms of their traditions and their culture, their legends. But when I got to the sea, which was the Indian Ocean, I kind of ran out of clues. There was nothing else. And so I wrote the first edition of my book, which was called Journey to the Vanished City being Senna, which at this point I hadn't found. And, you know, it was a very informative book, but I hadn't really solved the problem of where they had come from and whether they were Jewish or not. I just didn't have any overpowering evidence. There were hints, but there wasn't a smoking gun. And it was only a few years later, when I was doing a completely different book on the history of the Jews of the Yemen, that I found myself in the Hadramaut, which is a long valley which crosses Arabia. And I was speaking to a Muslim holy man, and very nice chap. He said, you know, what are you doing? You're a scholar. I speak Arabic. I said, yes. I'm studying, you know, I'm doing a book about the Jews of the Yemen. Oh, yes, wonderful people, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, I've been working on this Jewish tribe, or a tribe that claims to be Jewish, or some people claim that they're Jewish. And they came from a place called Senna. And his eyes lit up. Wow. And he said, right at the end of the Wadi, there's a place called Senna. And we have a tradition that once, about 1,000 years ago, people left there because the dam that permitted irrigation broke. And those people traveled via the port of Sahyut down to Sofala, which is the fabled port on the west coast of Africa, on the east coast of Africa, somewhere in present-day Mozambique. And this was one of the great cities of the world at the time. And when the Portuguese got there and they saw Sofala, they said, we've seen Venice and we've seen Florence and we've seen Lisbon, but none of these cities is anything like as wonderful as Sofala. Unfortunately, the Portuguese subsequently burnt it down, and there's no trace of that city today. But that probably is where the Lemba arrived in Africa. Anyway, I got to Senna in the middle of the desert, and I spoke to the people who were living there, and I discovered that the tribal or the clan names of the Lemba were the same as the clan names of the tribes that live round and about this ruined city of Senna. And then it occurred to me that, we could maybe do something with DNA. And so I went back to England, got a team together, and some little while later, we went back to the Yemen, and we went back to Africa, and we collected DNA all the way down the Wadi Hadramaut and in a wide arc around the areas of Zimbabwe and South Africa where there were Lemba settlements. And I should just say that prior to that, I just have to make a little digression. Probably 6 months or a year before that, we'd done another piece of research. And this piece of research was about the Kohanim, the priests. And I was walking down Gower Street in London, near the university, with a friend of mine who was a geneticist. I'm a historian. And, he was telling me about the Y chromosome. This is a chromosome that men have, women don't have it. And he said the Y chromosome you get from your father, and it doesn't change. He gets it from his father. It doesn't change. Throughout history, it doesn't change. And I said, it's just like the priesthood. Because the only way of being a Jewish priest is if your father is one. And the only way that he can be a priest is if his father is one. And the kind of idea is that the Jewish priests would go back in time, right until the time of the temple in Jerusalem. And so if we put these two things together, if we tested priests and we looked at their Y chromosome, we should be able to judge whether their story of descent from the priests of Jerusalem holds water, or maybe it's just a myth. So we did this, and lo and behold, a very, very exciting conclusion to this idea was that 52% of all of the self-proclaimed Kohanim or priests that we tested had a particular signature, which is called the Cohen modal haplotype. And when now, 6 months later, we're looking at the Lemba DNA and comparing it with the DNA of Southern Arabia, we discovered that the priestly clan of the Lemba had this very signature. Now, the chances of this being a coincidence is remote in the extreme. And so this really, along with other genetic elements, proved two things. It proved that the Lemba came from the Middle East, and it was strongly suggestive of a Judaic origin for the Lemba, at least on the male line. So this is really the beginning of my interest in the Lemba, meeting them rather by chance in Johannesburg, being asked to find Senna by dear Professor Mativa, going off, writing the book, doing further research on the DNA of the tribe, and then finally doing a number of films which had the effect of making the Lemba world famous, really, because they were fairly unknown before that time.
That's an amazing story, because I ran across the Sena people right after the first conversation I had with Kohen and Kohen Hamandishe. You're more than welcome to chime in, because I remember me and you having that conversation about the Sena people and how the Sena people are the Lemba people. And one thing I did notice, and I was trying to find the article and I could not find it anywhere, and I'm so upset about that. But it talked about over in the Mozambique area, which was called, I think, Mozambique Lake, where it was a trade going on between the Sena people and the Portuguese. And it had a lot to do with the gold in that valley. And which ultimately led to the war that you're speaking of. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Parfit, because like I said, I don't have the article in front of me, but it led to the war with the Sena people and the Portuguese in reference to trade, because they had a very strong trade agreement with the Portuguese, and it had to do with gold. And with that ultimately led to where it is now, which that area, they actually burned that area down. So I'm not quite sure if you ever came across that. Is that correct, or Dr. Parfit?
Yes, well, there's something in that. The Wasena people, certainly the Lemba, or as they're called in Zimbabwe, the Waremba. They're called Lemba in South Africa. Zimbabwe, the Waremba, also have a kind of another tribal names. They've got a number of tribal names. So Mwenye is one of them. Mwenye, they call themselves Mwenye, and Mwenye is kind of it's a term that is used on the East Africa for a kind of aristocratic, educated, landowning sort of class. And it's entirely likely that the ancestors, remote ancestors of the Lemba were precisely the Mwenye class in the East Coast. And yeah, I mean if you look at the map, and you look at the way the Zambezi sort of goes in through Malawi and then across, which is probably the point of entry. Sofala is just south of the Zambezi.
Zambezi, yes.
And so inland from that, you've got the Great Zimbabwe civilization. Mm-hmm. And, the chances are enormously high that the Lemba ancestors had played a very important role in this African civilization, which flourished between about the 11th or 12th century.
That's interesting.
And the 14th century. And if you just go onto the internet and look up look at images of the Great Zimbabwe, it's a wonderful place, and it's one of the very, very few stone building civilizations in sub-Saharan Africa. And there seems to be little doubt, to my mind, that the Lemba played a role. I'm not saying they built it, but they certainly played a role. And they'd come from the coast. They had, what I say in my book is that they probably had some kind of religious functions. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of evidence to show that Lemba lived in kraals, in royal setups, villages and towns in that part of Africa, and they functioned as doctors and magicians, and I suppose people who understand war.
Yeah.
So they had really very, very important functions in a number of courts, and it's, I think, entirely reasonable to suppose that at the court of the Great Zimbabwe you had a similar setup.
Yep.
And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that this was indeed the case. I've been waiting for a young scholar to come along and to look more closely, at some of these aspects. But I hope that we'll find somebody that's suitably qualified to take, aspects of the story a little bit further along. One of the things I would like to talk about, because this is new, a lot of what I've said already you can find elsewhere. You can find me saying it elsewhere, probably on the internet somewhere. But what I'm going to say now is completely new, and nobody will have heard this before.
Wow.
And I know that there are quite a few people out there, detractors, who are saying, the Lemba, they're not really Jewish, and all of this, and there's not really any black Jews in Africa and so on. So, okay, the story I've told is hypothetical to some extent. It's true that we found a link between East Africa and the Lemba. But maybe there's more to the story than that. And at about the same time as the Lemba were beginning to create a separate identity, or a tribal identity, after the destruction of the Great Zimbabwe civilization, there was another group also called Lemba. And these Lemba were also people that dealt in healing and in magic. And they were to be found, the second lot of Lemba people, more or less in the area of the Congo. And one of the things I talk about in my new book, which is this book here, Hybrid Hate, and you'd really have to go to the footnotes to get this information. And so you're not going to find it in a quick read. You're going to have to really study the book to get to these passages. But the facts and the proofs are mentioned in this book anyway. So we know that from about 1500, so 500 years ago, there was a black Jewish community that lived in the African kingdom of Luango. And they're mentioned really for the first time in Western literature in 1777. And that really is a very, very important thing in this last book of mine. And so what happened then, you've got a slave who's in one of the Danish colonies in the West Indies, and he's talking to a German missionary. And the German missionary he's a good guy, and he's very interested in the position of the African slaves. He's against slavery fundamentally, but he's extremely interested to know where these people came from. And so he sits down in this island, this Danish property, St. Thomas, which is now an American possession. And he interrogates them. He said, "Where'd you come from? What kind of things did you see on the way? What sort of job did you do? Were you from the interior? How many wives did you have?" All kinds of questions. He was a great anthropologist. And so this one slave that he interrogated said that he was from Luango, and that he said, "Anything interesting to tell me?" He said, "Well, yes, there is something interesting to tell you, because in Luango there are black Jews." And he told some of the stories about the black Jews. So the black Jews do not even speak on Shabbat, because Shabbat, it's too holy. They don't even speak. They do not speak, and I'm just using the term used in the original German, they do not have anything to do with the Negroes. They were black themselves, but they were Jews, and then the other people are referred to as Negroes. So they're as black as the Negroes, but they're not Negroes, and they have little to do with the Negroes. And they have separate graveyards, and on the graves, there are images of snakes and lizards. And then there are a few other very intriguing details about this black Jewish community in West Africa. Nobody's ever made a connection between the curious secret society of the Lemba in that part of the world. And it's highly speculative what I'm saying, but I think there's a very, very good chance that there's a connection between the black Jews of Luango, the secret cult of Lemba, and then the Lemba over in the central part of Africa. Almost certainly, but I can't prove it. But again, I'm throwing this out. If there are any bright young students or people looking for a PhD thesis, this could be something to really work on.
Oh, wow.
It's extremely interesting. And then, okay, well, we have this slave in 1777, and he's, telling the German missionary. Then we don't hear any more at all about the black Jews, and not for 100 years. And then, round about the time of German reunification, there was a German scientific mission to the Loango coast. And a number of German scholars and scientists, they arrived in a boat and they camped just next to the black Jews town. And they did a study of the population of that part of West Africa. And among other things, they gave a fairly good description of the black Jews of Loango who were still there. Since then, there were one or two comments about them. That was in 1770s. So 1780s, 1790s, we hear a little bit, not much. And then they kind of disappear from history. And it could be, this becomes a little bit vague, but it looks as if when the French colonized Loango, which they did in the 1890s, that they were traders and very prosperous traders in a very prosperous, centralized state. People forget how, civilized many of the African states were before colonization. And anyway, the French destroyed the possibility of trading effectively, and they moved inland. And so to the east of the Republic of Congo, a rainforest which is called the Ituri rainforest. And they seem there to have intermarried with a population up near the rainforest. And again, it's one of those things that a young scholar can follow up. There's plenty of evidence in my book for them to start, but a DNA project looking at that population would be absolutely fascinating, because it would certainly connect with Jewish DNA, going back to their emigration from Portugal in the 15th century. In other words, if you're looking for black Jews in Africa, there are quite a number of different routes. If you talk to our friends in Nigeria, they will find distant connections going back a very, very long period. That's one possibility. There's not very much historical basis for it, but it doesn't matter. In the case of the Lemba, we have a possibility via the East Coast. So the penetration of Africa from the East Coast. Further north, there plenty of evidence that Judaism spread into Africa, either from the Yemen, and that's what we usually think, or through Africa, or through Egypt, and trickled into different parts in the north. And also, we've got plenty of examples of Jewish settlement in the early 1500s in the northwest, in places like Senegal and Saint Tomé, an island off the west coast of Africa, not very far off the west coast of Africa, and now Luango. So the big question for the African community, African Americans, and there's been a lot of discussion over it, is, there are plenty of people who think, well, Judaism came with us to the United States or to the Americas from Africa, and this is something that's widely rejected as being impossible. But I think my research indicates that nothing is impossible. And given that there were plenty of Black Jewish communities which had settled long before the beginning of transatlantic slavery, it's entirely possible that there were Jews who were enslaved in the West Coast and, of course, in the East Coast. Not that many slaves came from the East Coast. Comparatively, most of the slaves came from the West Coast, and Luango was a major country for the export of slaves. Anyway, that's a new chapter for people to look at.
And I want to make sure people see your book. I'm going to share my screen. For some reason, I was having issues sharing. So this is the new book, Hybrid Hate. And I was trying to pull up my other screen and I couldn't. So yeah, this is the book and it's called Hybrid Hate. If anybody hasn't purchased it, I would say purchase it. It's available on Amazon. In fact, I've gotten my book from Amazon as well. So from the reviews about it, I said I have to get it. In fact, the person who first told me about the book was Only Love Austin. So I definitely will be getting that book. Again, I'll have the link within the description for anyone that would like to purchase the book. So I see Benayah on here. I hate that he's not up here, and I meant to reach out to him. So Benayah, you're more than welcome if you have questions, my brother, to come up here. Just let me know. Because he has done an extensive study on the Spanish Jews. And the great example, when you brought up Santa Tomé, that's one of his areas that he's really delved into. And I hate he's not up here. And I just thought about it because I know he's brought up great information. But anybody else has questions, Kohen, if you have anything, Pastor Kelly, I know you have a ton of questions as well.
Well, just real quick, and I know Professor is going to touch on it. Well, you touched on it with his book, and I was just glancing at your book, and as you made the connection of a lot of stereotypes, a lot of how can I put it, racist, studies and approach to people. Even when you made a reference in your book, chapter 2, about Jerome making the connection, but it was more of a racist of trying to explain dark skin and correlating it to being sin. The book, just from at a glance, and I'm really going to go through it like you pointed out, to really study it, go to the footnotes and things along that line. But just glancing at it, it isn't, just from what I see from the just skimming over it, it is a very much needed publishing that we all should read, and it should really give us an opportunity to see things from the lens of what's actual versus a lot of speculations and suggestion. We could kind of see a lot of roots to things there, just from some of the things that you pointed out of just stereotypes and trying to give explanations to things with already with motives and agendas connected to it. So I really look forward to you elaborating more in the book. But it was so much. I mean, just a little bit that I saw with the cross that you had there of a black person persecuting Christ. Just that in itself just resonates so much. So I want to step back and I'll ask my questions once you guys could continue to expound on some of the things that you guys are going to expound. I'll save mine towards the end as far as like a Q&A, because I definitely want to make sure that you guys have every opportunity to really touch on whatever areas that you feel is needed for us to really get clarity on. So I'm going to jump back.
Oh, no, you're good. Because the next question I guess I have is because I know you mentioned, Dr. Parfit, that they are still looking and doing some research into the connection. And I want to make sure I'm clear. You said the Lemba, the people of the Black Jews of Luango. And what's the other group they're trying to make the connection with that you hope that a younger scholar could come in and kind of help with that?
Well, there's a group in the Congo which is called Lemba. It's not quite a tribe, it's more a secret society. It's operating in the same area that we know that there were Black Jews who were traders and very prosperous relatively, who lived in a number of towns. And all I'm saying is that there is a possibility that there's a connection between these Lemba people and this Black Jewish manifestation on the West Coast, with what we know of as being a Judaic manifestation in Central Africa, round about Zimbabwe, but also Malawi. I came across Lemba brothers also in Malawi and found traces of them also in Tanzania. That's on my research.
So that's excellent. I guess my next question is, did you receive any type of opposition from any other scholars in reference to your findings?
Well, it's a curious thing. I used to be at the School of Oriental and African Studies, and to a lot of my colleagues, it seemed very racist what I was doing. I never thought of it as being racist in any way. And I was just describing what I'd been told and tried to find out whether what I'd been told was true or not. And this was partly because of the fact that people didn't really understand genetics. And a lot of people think there's something racist about genetics somehow. It looks like, old-fashioned race science in some way, which it isn't. And indeed, and particularly this book is a total refutation, a complete refutation of race, absolutely. And I would just say this, that, people who work in these sorts of areas know very well that race is a non-thing. It doesn't mean anything. There is no biological basis to race at all.
Correct. I agree.
And it is purely a construction. We construct race for whatever purposes, but it's not really a thing. It's a myth. It's not real. And why people, particularly in America, carry on using the term race, correct, I do not know. You can't fill in a form in the United States without having to put down your race. And I think, race? Why should I put down race? I don't have a race. There isn't a race. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And why should they want to know what color my face is? I mean, It's mad, utterly insane. And I should say that in Europe, in England, and other places, nobody uses the term race. If you use the term race, people look at you as if you're, from another planet. It's just not a term that you use. In French, race, and German Rasse, and in Italian, razza. You just don't. Here in America, it's different. It's you guys have got a major problem, let me tell you.
I agree.
Hey, Sister E, can I say something real quick? And I'll pass it over to Hamandishe because I see his hand is up.
Yes.
Just what Professor pointed out, as far as that race element, because here in America, as we pointed out offline, Professor, many of us have done our DNA tests and it's coming back Lemba, and we've been getting a lot of opposition because of that. We've been being ridiculed, demonized because of that connection to the Lembas, and being that the Lembas are being one of the many tribes that have been confirmed the connection with Israel. And so that's why I'm so glad that you touched on that, because I've stated in a number of my teachings and so forth about race, the construct race here in America. And so I really appreciate you just making it clear the difference between how the approach of race is here in the United States versus outside of the United States, and the problems and the burdens, the weight that many have to be subjected to here in the States versus outside of the States. And I just thought I'd just, comment on that, because we are getting a lot of opposition for showing that our DNA, showing the connection to the Lembas, because it's many that are coming up. Their results are connecting to Lemba. Mine's direct connection. William Brown, Pastor William Brown, Sister E, Marthel, she did hers live. And so many of us are getting a lot of ridicule because of that.
Yep. And that's key. And I know I go by Sister E, but my real name is actually Marthel Ellison. But we're Facebook friends, Dr. Parfit. But yeah, that is interesting, because the level of scrutiny that we've received by simply doing research, and not basing it off of speculation, but more so research that, there are Black Jews or Black Israelites here in the States. We've been getting all types of ridicule. We've been told that it's heresy. We've been told that Lemba are nothing but, it's been so disrespectful. But you see that mindset in this country to that race is the ultimate factor for that reasoning. And I know, Kohen, do you have any questions? And I also want to let everybody know that Benayah Israel is on. He is one of the many historians in our community that have actually done the due diligence, along with Pastor Kelly, Tyvon, and the rest of the community, to do their due diligence, just to kind of see this through and seek this out. So I just want to kind of let him know that he's open to ask whatever he wants to ask, because he's, like I said, one of our many great historians. But Kohen, do you have any questions, sir? Hold on, let me unmute you. Here you go. You're unmuted.
Thank you very much, Sister A. Actually, I haven't got a question, but I just want to add up to what Professor has just said about the discovery of the Lembas in East Africa and the Congo and all those places. Now, you see, if we look at the map of Israel and the size, the geographical size of Israel, and to match with the people being discovered now and again, there's quite a difference. The land of Israel is small and the people are many, which just confirms what the Bible says about what Adonai said to Abraham, that you have more children, as many as the stars, and as many as the sand. Now, we have got a lot of people, Jews scattered all over. And it's not only you in America who are facing discrimination or people are doubting your Jewishness, even here, even as the Lemba, because we have been trying to talk to, telling our people, our neighbors, that we came from Judea, but they refused to accept it, our story. But now that Professor Parfit has come up with this discovery, they are still doubting, and it actually adds more hate on us. That how can you be Jews? You are black, like you're even more black than us. The professor is a liar. Why didn't he take a DNA test? You remember, Professor, when we were at the University of Zimbabwe that day, and with some Arabs there, some Muslims, Lemba Muslims, they were saying, why didn't you take the Muslims' DNA and the Jews' DNA and the Lemba DNA, and you could compare? Remember, you were asked that question in that hotel. People are still doubting. But what I know is that what Professor Parfit is doing is not of his own. But I think Adonai is with a hand in all what is happening. Because the discovery of these people, which is taking place now, is just like wildfire. It's uncontrollable. You know, some people depend on the writings, on the history. But like us, we have no written record about our history. But we are coming out according to what the prophet said, according to the Bible. And if one wants to doubt about who we are, well, he's doubting the words of the prophets. He's doubting what Adonai said is going to happen at the end. He said, I'm going to look for my people. That's Jeremiah 31:31. I'm going to look for my people in the mountains, all over, and I'm going to send fishermen and hunters and hunt them out. This is what is happening right now. And I want to just to help you out that you don't have to listen to people who are arguing that you are not pure Jews. No. You don't have to waste your time listening to that. What is only needed now is to ask Adonai, why this revelation now? Why are we being exposed? What is the next? What is his plans for us? This is what I can say.
Thank you for your wisdom, and that's something I think that we have been dealing with. Benayah, you're more than welcome to come in. But I mean, we've done the digging and the research and getting the information needed to speak to this, because many of us up here, we when you come from college, when you come from this world, you have to do that research, and we that's what we believe in, that research and trying to get that evidence in place before we really speak to it. And Benayah, do you have anything? You've been kind of quiet, and I know Tyvon has been quiet as well.
Oh no, it's an honor just to be on a live with Professor Parfit. And Professor Parfit, I just want to let you know that thanks to your work, I mean your due diligence, your excellence in bringing out this truth. One of your books, I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head, I believe it was in your book about the black Jews in America. The references that you were able to dig up in that book were just amazing. I've heard other researchers compliment you on that part, that you were able to dig up and find references that just the average researcher wouldn't be able to find. I mean, you had there's a reference out there. I believe you referred to Robert Knox on there once. That was a great one. And many more I can't think of off the top of my head. But I'm a guy that I dig into the references. Like I'm weird like that. Like when I get a book, I don't necessarily go and look at the summary. I'll just jump back to the references and just take a look at the references and take a look at the publication dates just to see if there's a lot of old references that are used compared to contemporary references. Because based off of that, I can pretty much tell what the narrative in the book would be will be about. But your books, I mean, you tap into that reservoir of old references, and I just want to thank you for that, because I credit you in helping springboard me in my research, because I was able to, buy your book from Amazon, spend time going through your book and saying, wait a minute, there's a lot of information here, and use that to just to go off to college libraries and all these other different places to dig up some really, well, to build on your research is basically what I'm saying. So thank you, Professor Parfit, and just keep up the good work.
Yes.
Hopefully you're not going to retire soon. Good.
Does anybody have questions, Pastor Kelly? We can't hear you.
I want to give Tyvon an opportunity, because I know he's been here, and I have plenty of questions, but I just want to make sure others had the opportunity as well.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I'm going to definitely touch on that whole Lemba in West Africa concept. But first, I wanted to talk about Dr. Parfitt's work with the Kohen Jews, and also the Lemba, in the sense to where in both stories, there's small populations that turn into a larger population. I believe with the Kohen Jews, it was 7 that turned into a population of thousands, and then with the I believe in my distinct pleasure I had with interviewing Kohen Hamandishe, I believe, Kohen, you said that it was 12 people that turned into the population of the Lemba that we currently have. So being that those small numbers can turn into larger numbers, and also in my interview with Kohen Hamandishe, he said that he believes that there were Lemba on the slave ships that in the transatlantic slave trade that came to America. Is it viable? Do you think that we should also be doing DNA collects in America to see if there's a direct connection to the Lemba, being that over 500,000 people came from the coast of Mozambique and were taken to the Americas, and over 160,000 of such being taken to the Caribbean and North America?
Yeah, well, I think that it's. I think it would be interesting to trace it back, no doubt. And collections of DNA in different parts of Africa are now. We have collections of most areas, and I think that proper scientific genetic work could reveal a good deal. And this has been part of an enterprise that's been going on for a while. Some years ago, I worked a lot with Gates in Harvard, and you've seen his. I'm sure you've seen his TV shows. And the basic idea that we had at the time was that through genetics, you're opening a window into the past, which didn't exist before. And so in the case of African Americans, history pretty much stopped. With the Middle Passage, nobody had any idea of what happened really to their individual ancestors before that. And most people wouldn't know if they were Yoruba, if they were Zulu, if they were, whatever they were. Nobody would know this. But through genetics, it's possible to look at somebody's DNA, and then these tribal affiliations will show up in many cases. And going forward, this can only get more sophisticated. This can only get more accurate. Knowledge of our pasts through DNA will become more complete. And this is a very, very wonderful thing, and it's a very democratic thing. And I say democratic because, over history, over time, rather, it was only really the rich and the well-connected kings and queens and princes and aristocrats. These were the people who had history. The regular guys, the serfs and the working class people, they didn't have any history. And with genetics, we're all the same. Every man has got his history book inside him. It can be opened up. It can be studied. And if you find if people are finding in their DNA traces of a kind of Lemba profile, well, that is saying something about some of their remote or not so remote ancestors, and that is fascinating, and it can make a huge difference, I think, to the way that people see themselves. And you mentioned the Benayah Israel, Tyvon, and I mean, that was, there's a lot of racial, prejudice here, because, one of the reasons that African Jews find it difficult to be accepted as Jews by other Jews is because they're black, no question. And if a white group came up with the same amount of proof, there would be, nobody would even question it for a second. So there's some kind of antithesis in some people's mind between the idea of being black and being Jewish. And so it was with the Benayah Israel in Western India, where you've got a black community, like black people from southern India. And, so in Mumbai, used to be called Bombay, there was a kind of Middle Eastern Jewish community that was quite powerful and wealthy, and they controlled the docks and a lot of the trade, and they had some great figures, among them who were successful in all sorts of different spheres. And then you had these black Jews. Well, there was no intermarriage between the two groups, and the black ones weren't allowed to celebrate with the white ones. They were not allowed in their synagogues and so on. So there was absolute prejudice. And that basically said, they're not Jews. They're not Jews. And so that was a very satisfying piece of research for me, was to be able to, to do the DNA, collect DNA all over Western India, and to be able to come up with the proof that way back, they had left the Middle East. In fact, they left the same place as the Lemba did. They probably came from the Yemen, and they went east. They went to India, and they created a kind of, Jewish community that changed over years because they were isolated from other Jews. But similarly with the with the Lemba, white Jews in South Africa didn't want to know. They were very, very, very skeptical. They still are in many cases, and the question is very largely to do with color. And I don't want to promote my own book extravagantly or anything like this, but in this book, there is so much information about the connections between Jews and blacks, and the way in which these connections were understood in the period that led to the transatlantic slave trade on the one hand, and to the Holocaust on the other. These are two of the great events of history, terrible events. But I think they're explained in this book. The background to the hatred of Jews and the background to the hatred of black people is the same. And so, those the people who were killed in the Methodist chapel a few years ago, the black people who were killed, or the Jews who were killed in their synagogue in Pittsburgh, right? The origins of the hatred that can lead to things like that, it's the same. The people who were out attacking the Capitol here in America a few weeks ago, they were composed very, very largely of racists on the one hand and anti-Semites on the other, except there's no difference. It's the same. It's the same. The roots are the same.
Yeah, thank you for that. To your point about the continuing research about finding the Lemba or looking into the Lemba society in West Africa, in the Congo, whatnot. When I was listening to your lecture that you gave at BYU a few years ago, I heard you talk about when you went to the Yemen or to the Yemen, that you found like you said here, the a potential city of sin, etc. But there was an event in 1200 of a dam breaking that caused people to leave. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kohen, but when I was talking to you in our interview, and I've also heard you hear you say on this channel that your event, the event that when your people came into Africa, it was because there was a drought. So that would seem to suggest that there were two migration events, if I'm correct, or if I'm hearing your stories correct. Do I have that right? Two migration events from Senate, to be specific.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It makes sense very much. Because in our case, I always say that ours was not documented. There was no written record. And we had no time or to search on the other people. We're just concentrating on the Lemba. But they must have the other groups, which went maybe to Ethiopia, maybe they didn't end up in Sofara, maybe they went to Tanzania. Because we also get some Mwenye people in Tanzania. We also get some Lemba people in Congo. They are there. But in our case, it was only 12 boys who left Yemen and came to Sofala. There were only 12 boys in our case. But those are not the only people who left the Hadramaut. There must have been some other groups who went elsewhere.
Wow.
That's interesting. I'm gonna take one person out. 1 second, Benayah, I'll pull you back in. I wanted to bring in someone special. Hold on. There we go.
Why are you doing that? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was going to ask a question. I didn't know Pastor Brown was there. Go ahead.
Hey.
I'm sorry, Pastor Brown.
Yeah, Sister Martha strong-armed me. If I show you the text message, she strong-armed me to come on. I was laying back in the cut. Hey, Professor, how you doing?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Excited. I'm just enjoying the conversation in the panel, and can't wait to look forward to doing some more work and whatever we can do. Hamandishe, how you doing, Kohen?
I'm okay, brother. How are you too?
Good to see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
I see everybody doing well. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time, but great work. And I think this definitely well needed. I myself have to go purchase the book as well. Not some of the other books, but I need to go purchase the book as well. And so I'm just excited for what's going on, what's taking place, the gap bridging and everything like that. So I just want to jump on and say hello to you all. Pastor Kelly, what's going on, cuz? How you doing? Tyvon, blessings to you as well, brother. I'm gonna jump out of here. I know Benayah's gonna have a lot of questions, so I'm gonna jump out so I can listen to y'all talk. All right.
All righty.
All right.
And Sister, I had a question that I want to share as well. A piece of reference that I used to teach internally, but it ties right into Professor Parfit and give him opportunity to kind of really share with the people, because I saw his BYU lecture and many of your other lectures I've followed. And whenever you make references to sources on one of those, I write it down and I start reviewing those sources as well. But this is a source that I came across years ago. It's from the Encyclopedia of the Diaspora by Yale University. It was published by Yale University. And I'll just read it real quick. And if you want to touch on it, that'd be great. It says here on page 188, when the Portuguese Inquisition came to India, they fled south and established a new settlement in the 16th century and built the Paradisi synagogue. They were called the White Jews of Cochrane, while in the original group, who had darker skin, were known as Black Jews. And the favorable Dutch presence in Cochrane soon brought more Jewish merchants and settlers, and some moved north again. Non-Jews called them Saturday oil pressers. But it goes on to say here, Benayah Israel distinguished themselves from Black ones, imitating the Hindu caste system. So I just thought I'd bring that up. And I know you did some work in confirming some Israelites out in India. Did you wanted to kind of elaborate on that, sir?
Well, thank you very much, Pastor Kelly, for that. Yeah, it's a little unclear whether there's any real connection between the Benayah Israel and the Jews of what's now called Kochi. Today they call it Kochi. It used to be Cochin, now it's Kochi. And the probability, I think, is that or at least what they say in Cochin or Kochi, is that the white Jews came first. And indeed, we know that there have been Jews in the southern part of India for at least 1,200 years. And I mean, the argument is that the black Jews were the descendants of slaves taken by the white Jews, who eventually were manumitted and converted to Judaism. And so that's another piece of genetic work I did, which was on behalf of the black Jews in Kerala, Kochi, which showed that whereas, there was a good deal of local DNA there, nonetheless, there was a good deal of Jewish DNA there as well. So it was a mixed community. I mean, when I say Middle East Jewish DNA, I mean Middle Eastern DNA. And so I don't think there's any actual connection between that community right at the tip of India and the Benayah Israel in the West. They're not mentioned in any source really until 1760. And then it's a little bit vague, but they kind of pop up at that point, and you're absolutely right. They seem to have been assimilated into the Hindu caste system. They were Saturday oil pressers, and that was an ironic term because their caste job was pressing oil. They didn't do it on a Saturday, and so therefore they called them Saturday oil pressers, which was just kind of a joke. They didn't have much knowledge of Judaism when they were first discovered in the 18th century, and they developed it over the next couple of hundred years. But the DNA shows very clearly, and there's been subsequent work since, which is quite definitive, that they did derive from a Jewish population. It's amazing, actually.
Wow.
It is really amazing.
Oh, wow. Anybody else? Y'all quiet? Benayah, I know you got questions, my brother.
Oh, I didn't want to jump on and just ask a bunch of questions.
No.
But at the same time, Professor, I did want to get your thoughts on just a couple of things. And that one is when we look back at the Jews being expelled from Spain and Portugal back in 1492, and that the whole expulsion, what do you call it, the migration into the west coast of Africa. And if I remember correctly, I want to say I watched one of your lectures. I don't, forgive me, because I don't remember where you were when you were speaking. It may have been on TED Talks, but you mentioned that. And you briefly touched on this, and I think you said, if my memory serves me correctly, that the Jews left in multiple ways, right? It wasn't just I call it a one-hit wonder. They didn't just come, when the kids were taken to Sao Tome, but that there were other routes that they took. And I'm just curious, do you plan on performing any additional research on Spanish and Portuguese Jews? I did come across one of your students. They were doing I think it was his dissertation, and he briefly touched on it on Sao Tome, but it came across as a one-time event. Whereas in my research, I'm finding it being a sustained event, because not only did the Inquisition law, as one of its punishments, exile punishments, list places like Angola and Sao Tome as one of the destinations for their degradados, but we also, see that when people fled from Spain and Portugal, that they also fled over into the African area. So just to kind of restate the question, do you plan on doing any additional research as far as like the migration or the exile of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews into the west coast of Africa? Is that going to be covered in any of your upcoming books?
No, I'm not planning any more work on that subject, but I'm still taking MA students and PhD students, so it's possible that some of my students might do something. I mean, I think that the pressing thing would be to follow up on the population that's descended from the from this Black Jews of Loango community that went inland. But that really would take guts. It's inland. It's fairly dangerous and difficult to move around. And it would be. I don't think that's for me anymore. I used to do that kind of stuff, but I'm not as young Hamandishe as I used to be.
Yeah, I mean, and just for FYI, I mean, as far as like the Jews in Loango, that was one of the areas that we did a preliminary study on, and we were able to dig up some references on that where it spoke about the Jews in Loango, and there was some supposition as far as where they came from. I believe one of the people on site that actually interacted with them, said that they spoke perfect Portuguese, and they were just going off the top of my head, that they were they understood the Portuguese history very well. I think this is how I'm paraphrasing it.
Well, I don't know about that reference, and I'd be very surprised if it were entirely true. I think they would have known a bit of European languages because, after all, they traded. But in none of my sources do I get that, and yeah. I believe that they're descended from the orphans who were exiled, the Jewish orphans, Spanish Jewish orphans who were exiled to the Portuguese possession of São Tomé, but there's no absolute proof of that. It's probable, but you're absolutely right that there were plenty of other settlements, particularly in Senegal and down the what's called La Petite Côte. And there are a couple of very good books on the subject of this Sephardi settlement in the West Africa. We know, for instance, that by the middle of the 16th century, so 1550-ish, there were a number of communities that by then were black. They intermarried, but they maintained Judaism, and that's in Senegal. And undoubtedly, there were others further south, and we have references to these black Jews going way down the coast of West Africa. So the people that say, there just aren't any Jews in Black Africa, or there's no proof of it, are simply wrong. I mean, there is that, and the various kind of theories that emerge from kind of Jewish groups in Nigeria among the Igbo and in, let's say, Ghana with the community there, and different places throughout Africa. It's I mean, in a way, they're kind of theoretical. I'm not casting doubt on them because these are people's cherished beliefs, and one shouldn't cast doubt upon people's cherished belief. I mean, one of the things that many people in this country hold sacred is stories like the virgin birth. Well, it's difficult to prove that there was a virgin birth, but it would be very bad form and very ungentlemanly to go around and say, virgin birth, nonsense. And that's what people do, with respect to kind of origin stories, or every nation has got its origin stories, and they may or may not be historically true, but usually it's impossible to know. So, yeah, I mean, it's there's plenty of evidence anyway of these settlements. We also know that in the from the 17th century on, that the whole of the Sahara is full of black Jews. There's no question about that. It's absolutely it's there in black and white, and there are references to how they look, and they're not Arab looking, they're black African looking, and they're celebrating Judaism, and so that's the Sahara. That would be places like Mali and places like Chad and places like the Sudan, no doubt. So, the historical fact of black Jews in Africa is well attested.
In Africa as well as so in Africa, in addition to Africa, what about have you I think in your book, and I was trying to pull it up when Sister E, when you came to me the first time, I was trying to pull up Professor Parfitt's book. I was like, I know I have it here. I know it's right here somewhere. And so I finally found it. I mean, it's like I said, this is one of my gems, Black Jews in Africa and the Americas. And I don't have my Kindle open, and I have a Kindle version. But in your book where you talk about, you talk about Black Jews, you talk about, just to paraphrase, and of course, correct me if I misquote anything here, but you talk about like I'm trying to pull up a page here. You say 19th century physioanthropologists in general assumed that Jews had a close racial, that is blood connection with blacks. And then you also mentioned that up to a certain point, there was a understanding that that there was a connection between blackness and Jews. And I guess my question is, and I want to say that there was a one reference that you had in here that also talked about the Jews of Spain and Portugal, but I could be wrong about that. But when you were speaking about Africa, I was also wondering about the documentation for Spain and Portugal. As far as like the old documentation references that you've referenced in your book, do those from your studies, do those references also speak to the a certain look of the Spanish and Portuguese brews that's in line with the Jews that you find on the north coast of Africa, that's right across the waters from Spain and Portugal?
Yeah, I mean, let's take the first part of that. So I say that, by the middle of the 19th century, by 1850, it becomes fairly standard throughout Europe and the United States, among those scientific groups that were interested in race. And racial studies at the time were absolutely the cutting edge areas of intellectual endeavor, because it was considered that race was the motor of everything. And it's precisely at this point, 1850 is a kind of critical, turning point, where this becomes a mainstream idea. It can be exemplified in a number of ways. I'll give you one striking example. So there's somebody called Wilhelm Marr, who was a German Gentile, and it was he who invented the term anti-Semitism. The term anti-Semitism wasn't known before Wilhelm Marr. And Wilhelm Marr was responsible for setting or for creating the first political anti-Semitic group in Europe. I mean, because anti-Semitism became a political thing in very much the same way that racism in the United States recently has become a political thing, right? You've got one political party that more or less espouses it and another political party that rejects it. Or in the United Kingdom, until recently, the Labour Party, bizarrely enough, seemed to support a kind of anti-Semitism, and the Conservatives objected to it. So the first absolutely anti-Semitic political group was founded by this guy Wilhelm Marr, and yet Wilhelm Marr had a curious history. He started off extreme left. He was a syndicalist, and he had to flee to Switzerland because of his extreme political left-wing ideas. Then he went to America, and he saw slavery in action, and he very much approved of what he saw. He loved slavery, and went to Nicaragua, and he saw slaves in Nicaragua, black slaves. And he totally approved of this. He thought this was a great thing, and he didn't think that black people had anything at all to do with humanity as he understood it. And eventually went back to Germany, and he said, yeah, well, I've seen blacks in America. Well, the blacks in Europe are the Jews. And so all of the hatred that he had for blacks was transferred to the Jews in Europe. And so he started elaborating theories. You mentioned before Robert Knox in the United Kingdom. He was doing very much the same sort of thing at about the same time, but then soon after that, everybody was saying the same thing. And that same thing was that Jews have got black blood. And so there is no difference between Jews and blacks. And this idea of the absolute conflation of the Jewish body and the black body was mainstream European belief until the 19th century. In other words, of course, it's using the racial terminology that they believed in, that the Jews and the blacks in a curious way constituted the same race. Right? Of course, now we don't believe in race. And so whatever things they were saying then is of little significance to us. But that anyway was the belief of the time. And the Nazis, for instance, saw the main threat to German Teutonic racial purity. The main threat was Jews. It was Jews and blacks, but they were viewed kind of as one. And Adolf Hitler, when he thought about the United States, for instance, he saw the United States as being a black Jew. It was Jewish, and it was black, and that's all there was to it from his perspective. So these two things, Jews and blacks in these kind of discourses have been very, 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 very close. I'm not saying that, that there's any connection between that and the idea that, Jews, African Americans or other blacks might have Jewish origins. That really is a very distinct and separate thought. It is true, but it's a different thought to the one that permeates Nazi and fascist ideologies. I'm afraid that was a bit complicated.
No worries.
You'd have to read the book.
Yes, and I want to make sure everyone. I put the link in there for the Amazon, far as purchasing the book. Like I said, I purchased the book, and I know a couple of others are purchasing or have already purchased the book. So, like I said, I put the link, and I also make sure before we when this video uploads, I'll put the link in the Amazon link within the description, so that we can make sure and purchase the book, which is called Hybrid Hate. And let me put it up again so everybody can see it. And then everybody can come with their last few questions, because I don't want to keep Dr. Parfit and Hamandishe too late, because I know it's getting late there in Africa, Zimbabwe, Hamandishe.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say again, Dr. Parfit, great work. And I just want to read out of your book, Hybrid Hate. And like I said, it's really just me going through some of what I see here. It's really powerful. It's a much needed book. And I encourage everyone to purchase this book, but on page 32, um, it says here, by the end of the 18th century, a race-based approach to differences had nonetheless started to fortify the religious and ethnically inspired prejudices of the medieval and early modern periods. Biblically based explanation of blackness, such as the curse of Ham, gradually gave way to an understanding of blackness provided by anatomists, excuse me. Um, just looking here and just that phrase, I mean that section there, and just reading that whole section, you gave so much clarity, so many nuggets there. Did you want to touch on that more? I know you talked about race, and we agree that that construct that was created. For me, I teach it from a way that it promotes more stereotypes. The system itself. That's the origin of stereotypes that we see playing out today. But like I said, just reading a few of the pages of chapter 2 really echoes and it parallels to what we're dealing with today with a lot of the stereotypes with among religious groups and so forth. Did you want to touch on that, Doctor? But I just want to just give you room to kind of just give clarity on that to others that will get your book.
I'll be very pleased to. Would you excuse me just for a second? I just need to go and get the lead to my computer. Otherwise, I will disappear.
Okay.
I hope everyone's enjoying this. Like I said, we're gonna once we get done, everybody make sure they have their questions. We're gonna close up because we don't want to keep Kohen Hamandishe. How are you liking it so far? Do you have any questions?
Yes, I wanted to ask Professor a question, but let's wait until he comes back.
Yes, I definitely want to make sure you get to chime in because I know you have questions as well. A lot of us have been asking back-to-back questions. We are definitely enjoying this.
But Elder, in the middle of that, but Elder Rabbi, would you like to give some encouragements to us here that are dealing with the same ridicule that you've been experiencing there? Did you want to share any words of encouragement as Professor gets set up?
Oh yes. Well, it's the usual encouragement, Pastor Kelly, that we shouldn't focus much on the identity. We should focus much on our relationship with God. That's my words of encouragement. Because it's a war, as far as I know, it's a war of are we going to be recognized? Who is going to recognize us? If we waste our time on recognition, we are not doing any favor to ourselves. This is the question that I wanted to ask Pastor. I want to ask Professor Parfit. You remember some time after you did your DNA test, you connected me to a friend. I won't mention his name, in Israel. And she was in charge of the DNA test in Israel. And they collected the samples and they sent them to Tel Aviv to our friend. And they did their tests, and that was in 2010. I took a trip to Jerusalem, and I met him in Jerusalem, and he told me that the result, he gave me the results, that it was about, it was 70% Kohanim, our result, our samples. Now, ever since that, we haven't received any official document showing that that is our percentage, in that the Israel government did some tests on us. We haven't received any document, any evidence to that effect. Would you by any chance know the reason why? Because why I'm saying so, most of the people who took part in that test, which was done by the Israeli government, are passing on. Most of the elders are passing on. You know, Ishe Mongurwa is no longer with us. A lot of other Lemba elders whom you met are no longer with us, but they are passing on without knowing the results of their samples. And when I talked to our friend in Israel, he said that we want to redo the tests on the Lemba, but it's almost more than 10 years now, more than 15 years. They still haven't given us the official letter confirmation that our results were 70%. But he did tell me when I met him in Israel, and he also told you that the results of our DNA. But we haven't received any official document to that effect. Could you know the reason why? Or maybe you can ask whether for us that we would be very happy just to know our percentage or the results of our.
I'm a little bit, my hearing is not as great as all that, I'm afraid, so I'm not really picking up everything, but I think that if the question has got to do with the recognition of the Lemba in Israel, and that they have been slow in coming forward, it is for the reason, well, I mean, to be honest, I've been to the Knesset and I've addressed the Knesset on the subject of the Lemba and other African groups, and I've explained to them, you know, what it's all about, and they were very sympathetic and they were very interested. But then a number of things happened. This was 2 years ago, approximately, and since then, there've been a lot of African migrants who finished up in Israel, and they get into Israel through Egypt, or they get on boats and they go to Eilat. And so now there are, I don't know the figure to be honest, but it's probably somewhere around 100,000 or more black refugees, African refugees, living in, they've taken over an entire section of Tel Aviv. And so, you know, it's the same as here. The right is not very keen on them being there, and the left is anxious to accommodate them and to behave in a humane way. But, you know, the interest in encouraging further immigration from Africa is not great. And in addition to that, the Ethiopian Jews, since they arrived in the 1880s and 90s, are viewed by some Israelis as having been problematic. Unfairly, I think, to be honest, but you know, there are plenty of success stories, but at the same time, there are stories which aren't so successful. A further thing, I think, is that even though genetics, as I said earlier, gives one a glimpse into the past, it can never give you the full story. And Judaism as a practice, as a religious tradition, is not genetic. And, you know, a length of DNA doesn't make you Jewish or not, for the very good reason that, you know, Judaism, a question of faith, is a question of belief, is a question of practice, of traditions, is a question of shared history, and a whole range of other things. So, you know, to have a certificate indicating the presence of, you know, Jewish DNA, if we're going to call it that, which is not accompanied, if you like, by, you know, further evidence of marriage and death and belief and so on, is going to be very difficult to argue in front of a rabbinical court. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing. I actually think it's a bad thing, but you asked me why it is, and I'm giving you as honest an answer as I can. So on the one hand, just to go through it again, there is prejudice in Israel against black people. The prejudice against black people is partly because of innate racism among the inhabitants of Israel, and indeed among Jews generally. That's one thing. The second, but not all of them, some. The second thing is that the presence of DNA is, it's not being used in Israel yet as a determining factor of who is a Jew and who isn't a Jew. So I think that the whole thing is, it's something which is in progress. I've been pushing for it for years, and this culminated in my, trip to the Knesset, and addressing the Knesset on the subject, the Israeli Parliament. But it's one step forward and two steps back. Maybe things will change in the future. Certainly, a couple of years ago, the Israeli government had decided, as a result of my urging and the urging of people like me, that there should be a special policy with respect to African Jews, and indeed Jewish groups elsewhere in the world which didn't fit the usual pattern or criteria. And that would have been a good thing. And I certainly think that in the case of Zimbabwe or South Africa, the Lemba and similar groups, or the Igbo Jewish brothers in Nigeria, they really should have closer relations with the Israeli embassies and consulates and so on. And it looked like it was going in that direction. And I think perhaps it will eventually. But of course, there is always the option of conversion, which I'm not advocating. I'm not saying that this is what should happen. And I know that Lemba and others think, why should we convert? We've always been Jewish. I understand that.
Correct.
From the point of view of, the rabbinical authorities, this would be a route, but
understood. I'm sorry.
And I really understand. Thank you very much. I understand.
I hope it was helpful.
Yes, it's something to do maybe with the religion, something to do maybe with the, as you mentioned earlier on, maybe the race, or maybe they've got enough problems with the Ethiopian Jews. We cannot take more. I don't know. What you have said is true. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.
All right, family. Any other questions? I know, Moor, you have some?
Yeah, I have one final question for Dr. Parfit. And to preface the question real quick, to echo your previous points, my mother descends from a pocket of Jews found in northern New Mexico recently. And they were found to test up to as high as 38% with the Kohen model haplotype. And no one questions their identity as Jews in any way, shape, or form. However, I've recently done genetic testing, like other people on this panel, and found I have not only connection to Lemba, but even strong connections to Ethiopian Jews, etc., whatnot, and Yemen and other parts of East Africa and whatnot. And we receive ridicule just for doing research into that subject or whatnot. And part of that ridicule, and pardon me for the petulance of this question, has been people have actually used your work to try to say, or people try to say that your work can be used to disprove any Lemba connection to Semitic peoples, practices, and the people of the Hadramaut. So is it your permission that, or is it your position that your work can or should be used to try to make such claims?
Well, I can't see how my work can be used to disprove such claims, given that the genetic work that we did, both with respect to the Kohanim and also with respect to the Lemba and other groups in the world, offers the clearest indication that there is a shared history at some point in the past. I think what you mean is that, in the book I did about the Lemba, I explored all of the possibilities as we're trying to work out, where they're from. Every possibility is explored. And so there is for instance, evidence, or at least there's some suggestion that Islam might have played a role in the formation of the tribe, and bring the evidence for that. But it's very difficult to know, I mean, let's talk about because after all, I wrote a book about this, and nobody's mentioned the subject, but it's kind of interesting. So, if you look at the Lemba Ngoma, which means a drum, and there's a particular Ngoma that the Lemba say they brought from Israel a very long time ago. That's part of the oral tradition of the Lemba tribe. And so one of the things that Professor Mativa asked me to do was to try and locate the original Ngoma, which had been discovered in 1947 and 1948 in Zimbabwe, but then it got lost and nobody knew where it was. And I was able to trace it to the storeroom of a museum in Harare. And we have photographs of which were taken in 1947. There's absolutely no question, but this is the original sacred drum of the Lemba. Now, the sacred drum of the Lemba, the Ngoma, it was carried on poles by the priests. On each corner of the wooden object, there were rings through which the poles could carry the Ngoma. Inside the object, the Ngoma, sacred things were maintained and kept. It was known to be able to kill people. It was carried before the Lemba armies as they proceeded into battle. There are stories of it exploding, and according to one of the traditions, the Ngoma, the original Ngoma, which they brought from Israel, exploded. And so the one that I found, it was radiocarbon dated to round about 1400. And it's the oldest wooden object ever found in Black Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And the probability is that the legend of the Lemba, that at one point in the past the Ngoma exploded, referred to the Ngoma before this one, because it was always in need. It always had to be used. You had to have the sacred drum, but it would wear out. And so according to Lemba tradition, they would take a bit of the original one and they would make the new Ngoma on the basis, on the core, on the hard core of this, of the old one. And it's the hardest wood you can imagine. It's as hard as stone, this thing. So the parallels with the Ark of the Covenant, I mean, you all have an excellent knowledge, I know, of the Bible. There is no element of the Ngoma which doesn't strongly suggest the Ark of the Covenant, right? And yet, the idea somehow that the Ark of the Covenant should be, or at least a descendant of the Ark of the Covenant, something to do with the Ark of the Covenant, something relating to the Ark of the Covenant, maybe a kind of stepdaughter of the Ark of the Covenant, but something which clearly incorporates, the idea of the Ark of the Covenant, and that this thing was carried across Africa, as we know. There's even one reference which may be to that. And it was carried by priests who themselves carried the Kohen modal haplotype. It's highly suggestive, isn't it, of, to any reasonable person, I would think, that in some attenuated form, after many peregrinations, the Ark or something like it, a descendant of the Ark, came into Africa and was and formed part of the tribal beliefs and practices of the Lemba. But the fact that this isn't accepted by anybody is, I think, suggestive of absolute prejudice. People don't like to think that such a sacred object finished up in Africa. It doesn't sort of fit the pattern.
Wow, this is great information. All I don't want to keep up too much Dr. Parfitt's time. We have thoroughly enjoyed every nugget that you've given us. I've had to watch the chat and make sure I paid attention. And I am going to definitely go back over some other aspects of it. And I would love, if possible, whenever you have time, to come back. Because like I said, I want to get a chance to really delve into the book of a hybrid hate and probably bring on Only Love as well, for us to kind of talk through it of some of the findings within the book. But I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and the information that you've given us. Dr. Parfit, you brought great information. I'm sorry, Pastor Kelly, did you have something?
Yeah, because I know Dr. Parfit was getting his computer connected, because he was going to elaborate on a little bit, just one thing, passage I brought up in his book that I recommend everyone getting. Would it be possible if he can have a few minutes just to elaborate on what he was going to share before he had to get his computer connected?
Okay, are you good with that, Dr. Parfit? I don't
Sure.
want
just refresh my memory as to what the point was.
I read from page. Let me see. Let me pull it up here. Yeah, I read from your book on page 32, where it says, by the end of the 18th century, a race-based approach to differences had nonetheless started to fortify the religiously and ethnically inspired prejudices of the medieval and early modern periods. Biblically based explanations of blackness, such as the curse of Ham, gradually gave way to an understanding of blackness provided by anatomists. So I just wanted to see if you wanted to just kind of share some more thoughts on that quote from your book, for those that may not really grasp everything that's being said, as far as the race itself and how it's really hurt a lot of those that are using religion to how can I put it, promote agendas and so forth, and how race can actually hinder versus help.
Okay, yes, thank you. I think that the really important thing to grasp is that race has not always been with us. Race was an invention. So if you look at Saint Augustine, he writes a beautiful passage in which he said, echoing Saint Paul and echoing the Hebrew scriptures, that all of mankind is descended from the first couple, Adam and Eve. That was standard Christian belief throughout Christendom, as well as being Jewish belief and as well as being Muslim belief. So in the early modern period, in what's called the scientific age, and then throughout the Enlightenment in the 18th and early 19th century, the Bible is increasingly seen as being irrelevant to a true understanding of the world. And what replaced the sublime and, as it turns out, true biblical assumption that we're all descended from the first couple, to replace that comes the idea of multiple origins of people, which is called polygenesis. And the first articulation of a race-based division of the world only comes along in round about 1680, so a few years before the beginning of the Enlightenment. And the author of this was somebody called François Bernier, who was a French physician, who wrote Une nouvelle division de la Terre, a new division of the earth. It was the first time in the history of the world that somebody had divided the world into racial groups. Nobody thought of it before. They thought in terms of kingdoms, and you could divide it into religious groups or empires, maybe nationalities, but not races. And as the Enlightenment proceeded, there were more and more attempts to try and prove that there were different founding events for peoples. And so, some people would argue from a theological point of view that the first few books of Genesis are referring to more than one event. And so that Adam and Eve, for instance, are only really the mother and father of the Jews, but that there were people who lived there before, many such arguments, and that's called pre-Adamism. And so by the time you get to about 1850, the height of the racial age, if you like, well, I don't know whether it's the height of the racial age, but anyway, we're deeply into the racial age in 1850. It becomes really pretty much the smart thing to say that, well, black people don't have the same origins as English people. I mean, look at them. It couldn't be. So there are all kinds of theories about how black people had a different origin, or that yellow people had a different origin. And so the Bible was really thrown on the dust heap of history as being useless. It doesn't tell us anything. And so the smart guys, and if you read this book, you'll see plenty of examples coming from the scientific community at Harvard, for instance, before the Civil War. And they had all kinds of crazy theories about polygenesis. And, so this has gone on. And the 6 million Jews who died, the Nazis didn't kill them because of their religious beliefs. They killed them because of their genetic structure. Not even genetic structure, because of their racial structure. They could easily have killed all the black people in the world as well, because they thought that the racial structure of both of them was the same thing. Although they didn't intend to do that immediately, but they may very well have intended to do that finally. And after the Second World War, people started to realize that race was a complete and absolute nonsense, that it could not be defended from a biological point of view. It could not be defended even from an anthropological point of view. It was a nonsense. And there were various declarations on the part of the United Nations and UNESCO and various other international bodies saying that race does not exist. Point à la ligne, full stop. So here we are today. My own feeling, and most people don't believe me in this, I don't think, but the racial age which started in 1680 with François Bernier, and which led to the biblical account of mankind and to the biblical idea of mankind as being one. It was replaced by, systems and ideas, racial ideas, which sees mankind as being split into groups which are fundamentally and radically different one from the other. I do believe that this is coming to an end, and the events of the last couple of years here in America and elsewhere could be one of the last signs of this. We'll see. But I think that genetics shows so absolutely clearly that we're all the same. There's no difference between groups from a genetic point of view at all. And the kind of things that we're talking about, like you can see a bit of Jewish DNA or a bit of Welsh DNA or a bit of that. This is all on a bit of the genome, which is kind of utterly unimportant to anything other than remote historical origin, right? But in every other respect, all groups are the same. There are individual differences, and so if, for instance, we were to connect Sister E, let's say with Hamandishe, and if you were to look at the genome, you'd see differences. But if you were to do a kind over-the-board analysis, DNA analysis, let's say of Finnish people as opposed to Zimbabweans, you would see there was no difference. So there are no group differences, there are individual differences, no group differences. If there are no group differences, you can't have race. So this has become apparent through the study of genetics over the last 50 or 60 years. The consequence of a belief in race is, of course, as I said before, the slave trade is obvious. And why is it that they all of a sudden, they're taking black people? Why didn't they take other people? Plenty of other people, plenty of poor Irish people, but by the 18th century, they weren't interested in the Irish. They wanted to take black people because the racial theorists were saying that black people were suitable for this, or were inferior in some ways. But they were designated as slaves by some great kind of genetic truth. So anyway, there's been a racial age. Let's and I think perhaps we should close there because people want to go and have their Sunday lunch.
Yes.
And
I've enjoyed, and I hope we didn't keep you too long. Again, this was an awesome conversation. If possible, much later on, I do want to bring you back and we can further talk about the book Hybrid Hate. I want to make sure that everybody gets a hold to that copy. So when we do have this conversation about the newer book, we can be prepared to ask more questions in reference to that book. But from other books that you've written, I think everyone has asked very good, thorough questions. And I've enjoyed it. And I hope you did too as well, Dr. Parfit.
Thank you very much. I did enjoy it. And lovely to see you all again in some cases and for the first time in others. And so you have a great day. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Kohen Hamandishe. How are you? You're good. You're more than welcome. Yes. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. Did you have something, Hamandishe?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Sister E. Thank you, brother, Pastor Kelly. Thank you, my young brother. Thank you, Professor Parfit. And thank you very much for making this occasion to meet him again after so many years. I thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to this type of discussions, which are very, very healthy for our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you again for your all support. We'll be doing some more bills like this. We're going to have more people come on and we're going to discuss this. We're going to definitely bring Kohen Hamandishe back on. So again, I want to thank everybody. Anybody have any closing words before we go?
Oh, it's a pleasure hearing your voice, Mr. Hamandishe. I've watched your your lives before. And I meant to jump on earlier and just say hello, but it's a pleasure to meet your acquaintance, sir. I just want to get that in. Sorry, Sister E. Go ahead.
Oh, no. But Benayah, I'm glad that you're on. Anything from you, Pastor Kelly, or Orthodox Moor?
Yeah, I just want to say, oh, you go ahead.
No, you got it, brother. Go ahead. Got it.
I want to say, Kohen, it's always a pleasure to hear and see you, and I appreciate all the hard work and the labor that you have done and continue to do. And I thank you for being the true elder that's needed and pushing forth the kind of temperament that we need to have as we're coming to the understanding, many of us, of to who we are, but there's still a certain temperament, a certain level of respect, a certain level of dignity that we have to carry ourselves to represent the Most High. So I really appreciate all what you do and look forward to doing more lives with you. And I look forward to doing some things, future work with you. Look forward to coming to visit you. My goal is to get there this year to come visit you and the rest of the family out there, and just with my family to really connect with you. So I really appreciate you, Kohen, and I look forward to seeing you in the very near future.
All right.
An honor. Very, very big honor. Thank you very much. Looking forward to see you in Zimbabwe.
That's amazing. Me too, as well. I'll be out there. TJ,
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you call him second son, TJ.
Yes, I will definitely take that. I wanted to give a special thank you to Sister E for setting up this wonderful and edifying conversation. I'm definitely going to rewatch it a couple of times because there was so much information that was laid out in here that I know I didn't digest it all the first time. But I also want to give a special thank you to the Elder Kohen Hamandishe and also to Dr. Tudor Parfitt for their time, their energy, their labor, and their spirit. Thank you very much for what y'all do.
Yeah, and shalom to you, brother, as well.
Shalom,
shalom, Mark. And Sister E, if I could have just one request, can I get a little lead time next time? I just so happen to be walking by my computer.
I'm sorry.
Like, oh, Sister E gonna lie. Let me hop on.
You know what? I had meant to reach out to you, and I was like, let me get the lineup together because I was a little rushed because you know how you do in the beginning of the year stuff for work, and I've let work get me so not sidetracked. That's the main thing that I said I got to get focused and get back on this thing with getting Kohen and Dr. Parfit on. So my apologies. I'm gonna get back on track. Y'all got to help me with this. I need an assistant, being honest. I gotta find one.
Oh, I need one too.
I need one badly. So I'm putting out applications for assistants. No, I'm just joking. I actually do need one.
But I did want to say one thing, Sister E, and Pastor Kelly. I'm gonna send a couple of references your way. I'm not sure if Moray Majors is still on, but I did want to get some references into Professor Tudor Parfitt's hands as far as like the Jews of Luongo, because we do cover that in the movie coming up, and so I do have quite a few references on that. Just that because it was I didn't have it handy when we were talking about it, so I couldn't say, oh yeah, well this reference says that and that sort of thing. So I did want to circle back on that. So y'all will, and I'll get that to you. Oh man, there was another thing about the Spanish support. Oh, and another thing that also in the upcoming video, we are also going to touch on the anti-Semitism. If you ever heard of that word, and people always kind of want to throw it around. Professor Parfit.
Hold on one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
You want me to end the broadcast so y'all can talk?
Oh, well, I mean, it's just for anyone that's interested.
Okay, cool.
Anti-Semitism. We'll go into the history of that when it came to being Professor Parfit brought it up, made an excellent point about it coming into being around the mid 1800s, and that the books that were written before that could not have been anti-Semitic because anti-Semitic wasn't defined as a term, right? It wasn't a thing. And that's one of the things that he brought out. But also I do want to show you that the references that we've been bringing out, a lot of them are older than the 1850 date, which means they're not anti-Semitic. It's just the way that the Jews were described. So, y'all willing, we'll bring that out in some future videos. But that's it. Thank you, family.
Shalom. And my apologies, my brother Benayah. Next time I'm gonna make sure and give you're gonna be my first person on my list from now on. Kelly has been put down on second on the list. You're first now, so Kelly, you're downgraded, bro. Now,
hey, Sister, and real quick too, and I'll share the link in the timeline. What Professor shared about race, and you already know I've been teaching this for years about the institution of race. And R.G. Smetley, if you guys look her up, look her up with PBS. She gives a great writing. Does a great article about explaining the institution of race being a folk idea that was built off of no type of scientific equations. So basically, in a nutshell, it was created to promote stereotypes. So I thought I'd just share that, and I'll put that inside the timeline. But again, thank everyone. I appreciate all you guys for being here. And Benayah, you know how we do. You know, I really appreciate you and appreciate you for picking up my calls, my last minute calls. You know, when I have something that really grabbed my attention. So I really appreciate you as well. Thank you, Sister E, for doing this and putting this together, because this is what is truly needed. All the other stuff outside of this is just a distraction and taken away from exactly what the Most High really wants to reveal to all, to all of his people. And so thank you for doing this. I really appreciate you.
More than welcome. More than welcome. We're looking to do more things like this. And looking to have more conversations. Hopefully we can get Dante to get the Jerusalem Council back together. I think everybody's been so busy that we need to come back around and have these type of conversations amongst each other. Because we can't forget about the work, Dante and Teo has done as well. So I would love for us to come back and revisit the Jerusalem Council that we originally had. So we'll have conversations with him. But this is what we need. No more of the arguing and the debating. And that's my rule for this year. No more of that. It'll be information. Especially the information that comes from Pastor Kelly and especially Benayah with the Hidden Hebrews series that he's been working on. And Tyvon, TJ, Orthodox Moor coming down on the information when it comes to the DNA and dealing with that other side of the realm. But I do want to thank everybody for their support and thank everybody for helping me through this. I actually was thinking about taking a long break. And when I say a long break, I was actually thinking about, putting my channel on hold for a second because I had started getting burnt out. And conversations with individuals and encouragement to keep going has brought me back to this point. But brought me back to this point. It was nothing that was done before words get out there. Sister E was finna back down because no, it was not because of what has been going on for the past couple of weeks. This is something I've been contemplating for the past about 2 months because I know I had just started a job and daughter going to college, and I was like, I need to take a break. And I was actually getting ready to take a break. And I thank Yah for the wisdom that has been given to me that I'm gonna continue on. This is another reason why this was so last minute, because again, I was getting ready to kind of chill for a little bit, but Yah willing, I made it through his guidance and by way of the Holy Spirit, I made the decision to continue on with this journey. So look forward to more information and more dialogue coming. Clubhouse has given me a new avenue as far as reaching out to new environments and new Israelites. There's a whole community of Israelites that we have no idea about. And Clubhouse has allowed me to see that. We have a whole sect called Hebrew Pentecostals, Israelite Pentecostals that have steep history in the community, and they've just been kind of quiet into themselves. So I will have a couple of them on coming from Clubhouse, and not to mention my group, the group that we have here, because we're bigger than what most people think. People think we're a small community, but we're much bigger than, again, that's another reason why I decided, I said, let me stay in this for a little bit longer going into Clubhouse, because it's a little bit, it's an audience out there that needs this information. And I just thank y'all for that opportunity. It gave me a new breath of life to say, okay, I can continue on. So keep me in your prayers, and keep all of us in your prayers, because a lot of us get out here, and when we do this, we're putting and that's for keep Benayah, all of us, Pastor Kelly, I don't want to give out names, but all of us that are in this, it is a toll. And some of us, we work hard at what we do, and it makes some of us just say, you know what? We getting ready to go chill. If y'all don't like the information, we getting ready to chill and get focused on what we want to get focused on sometimes. And y'all had to correct me on that. And when I got that correction, my mind changed, and it made a turn. But what they don't realize, the very thing that they wanted me to do was step down, is giving me more energy to continue on with the will of Yah. So I praise Yah for giving me direction. I praise him for giving me insight in what needs to happen next. And I'm going to keep going. And that's what's funny, that, you know, people thought that I had tapped out, and I was like, no, I've just started. That's why I put that video out that Sister E is back, fully energized. So, but I pray, like I said, I'm just happy that I'm going this route. So look for more information, more stuff coming. Ignore the naysayers. That's why I wanted also to bring my brother up here, William Brown. I don't care what anybody says, that's still my brother. And we're gonna stand with him, and that's coming from me. And and we're gonna make sure that our community is good. So again, I don't want us to lead into this, because this was a wonderful build, but understand that we haven't stopped. We're gonna keep going. None of us have stopped, and we're not gonna stop. Benayah has stuff coming. Pastor Kelly has stuff coming. I have stuff coming. All of us, Teo and Dante, we got information coming. So what they thought that was going to stop us is giving us more energy to continue on. So just keep us lifted, and understand that this is a fight of faith more so of anything. So that's all I have to say. So anybody else before I close out? And Orthodox Moor too. I don't want to forget about him, because he's been coming for Garfield's neck, bro. That's all I got to say.
There's way more on deck.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say the same thing, brother. I mean, go ahead, brother.
No, I was like, we got to build Benayah on a lot of on your information in terms of like the Inquisition and whatnot, bro. Because there's a lot of like my family history and what you're talking about that overlaps. So I think we can make some interesting connections on.
Yeah, like I said, most high willing, man. People don't realize that we haven't. It's like an iceberg, right? I mean, the full body of evidence hasn't been presented yet, and I guess that's the frustrating part, because when you see people try to come out against it, it's like, bro, you don't see all that other stuff that we haven't brought out yet. You know, either we haven't had time, or we have it tied up in some movie stuff, and you know, don't necessarily want to ruin the plot, you know, before the movie comes out. But yeah, I mean, we've got this covered, and even, you know, I hate to even bring up the church stuff, but even with the church stuff, we got it covered. Trust me, we got it covered. So, you know, most high willing, you know, as time goes on, we'll bring out more and more, and you'll see that this thing is locked tight. If this was a court case, the person would be convicted already. We'd be talking about time served. I mean, that's it. I mean, about as far as the sentence wise. So, yeah. So y'all willing to stay tuned?
Yep.
I'm on. So.
All right, y'all, keep us lifted. And again, thank y'all so much for our support. We do this because Yah is leading us to do that do this for his people. And it's more so for his people than it is for us at times. So just keep us lifted. And I thank y'all so much for your support, and continually support us. And someone asked what Clubhouse is. Clubhouse is it's kind of like a audio chat room. It's kind of like the audio chat room of Facebook, but you have to have an iPhone to get in. And again,
you have to be part of that connected to the evil empire in order to get in. You have to have an iPhone. You know, you have to be connected to the evil empire. I'm sorry. I thought my mic was muted. I'm sorry.
Don't be mad because they left Android out. You know, Android is that, you know, second rate, you know.
No. See now we're gonna have to talk about this on the next one. We're going to talk about this. You got your signs up by the water fountain. iPhones only drink of this fountain. I got you. I see what's going on.
Y'all are hilarious. They are working on a Android. I saw that online. They're getting ready to work on an app for Android. So y'all Android people can eventually come in. You know, we want to keep it kind of, you know, bougie right now. So I'm just joking. But it's an interesting environment because we get to see a whole nother community. And y'all allowed me to see that there's a whole other group that we have not connected with. And by doing that, that allowed me to say, wait, we're not done yet. So I'll probably I am going to be bringing them on. In fact, I've talked to a couple of them. I got a chance to meet the pastor, the son of, I think he's the son of the pastor that did that eulogized Marvin Gaye. And people don't realize that Marvin Gaye came from a apostolic Hebrew environment, church, that believed that they were Israelites. And I got to meet his son in that environment. It was amazing to meet. And I think it's his son. I got to double check. But from the conversation, it was that. So he will definitely, you know, I'm planning to bring him on and a couple of other people. It's bigger than they think. This world is bigger than just even us. Because I walked into an environment where people was like, who's Pastor Kelly? Who's a Sister E? And they have no idea. We have no idea of each other. Even the Black church itself is getting ready to make a turn, and I see it within that environment, and they're beginning to look into this. This is why I tell the family, you know what, because individuals don't worship like you, don't judge them, because they're coming into this environment. And again, I still hold fast to my apostolic belief system, so I'm not steering away from that. But there's a whole nother world. And you see some of the Black church beginning to ask these questions. Wait a minute, this makes sense. This makes sense. We need to, you know, have a discussion. It's more people that are coming into this understanding than we think. And we got to be careful to, you know, not just isolate it to just us, because it's bigger than what we think. It's growing every day. And like I said, Clubhouse allowed me to see that it's growing, and other avenues as well has allowed me to see that this is bigger. So while it's growing, we need to still be working together and putting information out so the people can have somewhere to go and learn. So I don't want to keep anybody any longer, but I just wanted to say that, and just be ready. This is going to be a whole nother avenue that not a whole nother avenue, but it's another group that I want people to kind of see and meet and be aware of. So, all right, family, anything else before we close out?
No, just thank you for letting me participate, and peace and love to the family.
All right. Much love to you. TJ, that's your new name for me. I'm calling you that now. So, all right, family. Well, thank you so much again for y'all support. All right. Bye-bye.